London, April 1984. The wind cuts across the face with fragments of dust, and the posters of Big Brother watch from every corner with eyes that never blink. Here, in this world that George Orwell constructed with the precision of a nightmare, truth is not what happened, it is what the party says happened. The past is not a fixed record, but a living document, endlessly rewritten. And when truth becomes malleable, when 2 + 2 can equal 5 if necessity demands it, what remains of the human mind? Winston Smith works in the Ministry of Truth, where truth is the last thing that matters. His function is to rewrite the past, erase people from history, make events disappear as though they never existed. Each day he destroys documents and creates new ones, shaping reality according to the needs of the moment. It is a job that erodes something fundamental in the soul, the very notion that there exists an objective reality, independent of what someone decides it ought to be. Every fact is provisional, every memory is suspect. But Winston harbors a dangerous secret. He still remembers. He remembers how things truly were before they were altered. He remembers faces that were erased, events that were officially denied. He remembers a childhood that the party insists never happened the way he recalls it. And this capacity to remember, in a world where individual memory is a crime, makes him the most dangerous kind of criminal, a man who maintains his sanity in a universe engineered to make everyone insane. The world surrounding Winston is built upon systematic inversions that defy logic itself. The Ministry of Truth produces lies. The Ministry of Love administers torture. The Ministry of Peace manages perpetual wars. And the Ministry of Plenty oversees chronic scarcity. These contradictions are not mistakes or ironies. They are the backbone of a system that operates through the systematic destruction of the human capacity for clear thinking. Contradiction, embraced willingly, becomes the foundation of absolute power. This is an account of how a human mind can be systematically dismantled and reconstructed, of how love can be weaponized, and of how the last frontier of freedom, the private space of consciousness itself, can be invaded and conquered. It is perhaps the most disturbing story ever told about what it means to be human when being human has become impossible. It is a warning dressed as fiction. The true power of the party does not reside in the telescreens that surveil every movement, nor in the thought police that punishes dissidents. It resides in something far more subtle and devastating, the systematic manipulation of the very language through which we think. Orwell understood a fundamental truth about human consciousness. We cannot think concepts for which we have no words. Language is not merely a tool for expressing thought. It is the very medium in which thought is possible. Newspeak is not merely a new language. It is a technology of mind control. Each edition of the dictionary contains fewer words than the previous one, systematically eliminating not only dangerous terms like freedom or justice, but also the subtleties of meaning that enable critical thinking. When you remove the word bad and replace it with ungood, you are not merely simplifying vocabulary, you are destroying the capacity to perceive moral gradations, to understand that evil may be qualitatively different from the simple absence of good. The shrinking dictionary is an instrument of intellectual lobotomy. Winston watches this process unfolding in real time. His younger colleagues already speak almost exclusively in Newspeak, and he notices how their conversations grow increasingly shallow, how their facial expressions lose nuances of doubt or questioning. They are not being censored. They are literally incapable of formulating complex thoughts because the linguistic tools for doing so have been removed from their minds. Thought crime, in the end, becomes neurologically impossible. Even more devastating is the concept of doublethink, the capacity to simultaneously hold two contradictory beliefs and accept both as true. Winston has mastered this ability in his work. He knows perfectly well that he is altering historical documents, yet simultaneously believes that it has always been this way, that the party never lies, that the past is exactly as current records indicate. The contradiction is not noticed because it has been made invisible from within. This is not simply hypocrisy or pretense. It is a genuine fracturing of consciousness, a form of institutionalized schizophrenia that allows the individual to function within a system built on contradictions. Winston can look at a photograph proving that 3 men were falsely accused of treason, memorize every detail of that evidence, and then drop the photo into the memory hole while simultaneously forgetting that it ever existed. The erasure is total precisely because it is self-administered. Doublethink is essential for psychological survival in Oceania. Without it, the human mind would collapse under the weight of constant contradictions. With it, citizens can navigate a world where chocolate has always tasted the same, where the country has always been at war with the same enemy, though yesterday the enemy was different, where rations have been increased though they are smaller than last week. Memory and reality are simply decoupled. In a moment of desperation he cannot fully explain, Winston commits the ultimate crime. He buys a diary and begins to write. The first words emerge almost by themselves, as if welling up from a long-suppressed source. Down with Big Brother. In writing those 3 words, Winston experiences something he had forgotten was possible, the sensation of possessing a mind of his own, separate and independent from the collective mind the party seeks to create. The act of writing is the act of existing. The diary becomes more than a repository of forbidden thoughts. It transforms into the only evidence that Winston still exists as an individual. Each entry is a small victory against the erasure of his identity. Each word scrawled is an affirmation that his personal perspective still holds value, still deserves to be preserved somewhere, even if only within the pages of a hidden notebook. The private record is the last act of resistance, but writing the diary also reveals something deeply disturbing. Winston discovers that his memories are fragmentary, possibly fabricated, perhaps entirely false. He cannot remember with certainty what life was like before the party. He does not know whether his mother truly existed in the way he recalls her, whether the enemy planes that supposedly bombed London are real or imaginary, or whether chocolate was always rationed, or whether that is a fabrication of his conditioned mind. Even his own recollections have become unreliable witnesses. The act of writing forces Winston to confront a devastating reality. He may be recording not truth, but only the illusions that remained after decades of brainwashing. The diary, which should be his anchor to reality, may be nothing more than another fantasy, another delusion carefully cultivated by the party. His resistance could itself be a manufactured performance. Julia bursts into Winston's life as a completely unexpected force. Initially, he despises her. She seems the perfect embodiment of indoctrinated youth, fervently loyal to the party, enthusiastically participating in all the rituals of hatred and worship. When she secretly passes him a note with the words, "I love you," Winston experiences something he had forgotten was possible, the genuine connection between 2 minds that recognize each other as fully human. It is an act of mutual recognition that the party has outlawed. The relationship that develops between them is more than romance. It is the creation of an alternative reality. When they are together, they can say that 2 + 2 are 4 without fear of being contradicted. They can remember what chocolate tasted like before the rationing. They can imagine a world where people make love for pleasure rather than reproductive duty, where private thoughts are not crimes, where individuality is celebrated instead of punished. Their shared space becomes a pocket of truth inside a universe of lies. Julia reveals a perspective that initially confuses Winston. She does not care about the great political or philosophical questions that consume him. She does not want to overthrow the party for ideological reasons. She simply wants to live, to feel pleasure, to keep her basic humanity intact. For her, every act of pleasure she commits is an act of rebellion. Every moment of genuine joy is a victory against a system designed to make life grey and flavorless. Her resistance is visceral rather than intellectual. This difference in perspective reveals something crucial. There are multiple forms of resistance. Winston resists intellectually, questioning doctrines and preserving memories. Julia resists physically, maintaining her sexuality, her capacity for pleasure, her connection to bodily sensations that the party seeks to suppress. Together they form a complete resistance, mind and body united against dehumanization. Each complements what the other lacks. Winston purchases an antique glass paperweight with a piece of fossilized coral at its center. The object becomes far more than a simple keepsake. It represents everything Winston values: unnecessary beauty, permanence, an authentic connection to a past that genuinely existed. He imagines himself and Julia trapped inside the glass, like the coral preserved forever in a moment of perfect happiness. The object is tangible proof that beauty once existed and was not invented by the party. The paperweight also symbolizes Winston's illusory belief that there exists something the party cannot touch, a core of human experience that remains inviolable no matter how total the external control. He believes that even if his body is captured, even if his actions are controlled, his inner mind will remain free, protected like the coral inside the transparent glass. It is a belief he will cling to until it is methodically shattered. This illusion is fundamental to Winston's ability to maintain his sanity. He needs to believe that there exists an inviolable inner space, a last refuge where he can be genuinely himself. The glass paperweight gives material form to this belief, giving physical shape to the hope that some beautiful and true things can survive even in a world of ugliness and organized lies. Beauty in Oceania is itself a form of subversion. O'Brien, the apparent member of the secret resistance known as the Brotherhood, reveals himself as a party agent who has been observing Winston for years. This betrayal is devastating, not only because it destroys Winston's hopes, but because it reveals that his rebellion was never secret. It was permitted, observed, studied as a psychological experiment. The party does not merely defeat resistance, it curates it. During the interrogations in prison, O'Brien explains to Winston the true nature of modern totalitarian power. It is not about ruling through fear or economic self-interest, as tyrants of the past did. It is about power for its own sake, about the psychological necessity of controlling not merely behavior, but the very perception of reality itself. The party does not want obedience, it wants conversion. "How do you know that 2 + 2 are 4? Asks O'Brien. Not as a mathematical question, but as a fundamental philosophical inquiry. What if everyone, absolutely everyone, said they were 5? Would you be the only madman in a sane world, or the only sane person in a mad world? The question strikes at the heart of the nature of truth and reality. Do they exist independently of consensus, or are they merely social constructions that can be altered at will? It is the most terrifying question in the novel. O'Brien demonstrates that he can make Winston see 5 fingers when he holds up only 4, simply by applying sufficient pain. This is not merely physical torture, it is the demonstration that the very perception of reality can be altered through the manipulation of pain and pleasure. If you can make someone see things that do not exist, and fail to see things that do, you have achieved total dominion over their mind. Reality itself becomes negotiable. Room 101 represents the apex of the mind control technology the party has developed. It is not a place of punishment, it is a surgical laboratory where human personalities are carefully dismantled and rebuilt. O'Brien explains that every human being has a primal fear, something so terrifying that when confronted with it, the entire structure of the personality disintegrates completely. There is no heroism possible at the threshold of one's deepest terror. For Winston, that fear is rats. The choice is not arbitrary. Rats represent everything Winston finds repugnant, uncontrollable, capable of devouring and destroying. When O'Brien holds a cage of starving rats close to Winston's face, something breaks irreparably in his mind, not merely temporarily, but in a way that cannot be undone. The fracture is permanent and deliberate. "Do it to Julia," he screams in absolute desperation. "Not me. Do it to Julia. I don't care what you do to her. Tear off her face, strip her to the bone. Not me, Julia, not me." These words are not merely a cry of fear, they represent the voluntary destruction of the last remnant of his individual humanity. He does not betray Julia, he annihilates the part of himself capable of loyalty. The cruel genius of the system is that the betrayal must be voluntary. Winston is not physically forced to betray Julia, he chooses to do so in order to save himself. And this choice, made in a moment of extreme terror, completely redefines his identity. He discovers that he is someone capable of sacrificing what he loves most for self-preservation, and this revelation about himself transforms him into a fundamentally different person. The choice is the instrument of his own undoing. After Room 101, Winston is released, but he is no longer Winston. Externally, he appears the same. He works, eats, sleeps, functions normally in society. But something essential has been removed or altered in his psychological architecture. When he meets Julia again, neither of them can feel anything for the other. Love was not merely discouraged, It was surgically excised from their minds through controlled trauma. What remains is an empty shape, wearing a familiar face. The most devastating aspect is that Winston does not feel unhappy or oppressed. He has genuinely come to love Big Brother, and he experiences this devotion as completely authentic, not as something externally imposed. His mind has been reconstructed in such a way that he looks back at his former life of resistance and feels only pity for himself, pity for having been so deluded, so blind to the obvious truths the party had always tried to teach him. The transformation is total because it is felt as liberation. Winston's final transformation represents perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the entire Orwellian narrative. He was not simply broken, defeated, or forced into external submission. He was genuinely reconstructed as a different person, someone who experiences real and spontaneous love for the system that methodically destroyed his former identity. His new convictions are not pretense, conformity born of fear, or strategic obedience. They are emotionally authentic to the person he has become. The old Winston is not imprisoned, he is simply gone. Orwell confronts us here with a disturbing truth about the nature of human identity. We are more malleable, more vulnerable to reconstruction than our everyday experience allows us to admit. Under systematic pressure and scientifically applied manipulation, the mind can be altered so completely that the new personality feels natural, organic, and true to the one who possesses it. Winston at the end is not lying when he declares love for Big Brother. He truly loves, because he has genuinely become the kind of person capable of loving what he once hated. The horror is that the change is sincere. The dark genius of 1984 lies in demonstrating that the most effective totalitarian control is not the kind that forces external obedience through threats and punishments. It is the kind that reconstructs personality in such a way that obedience, devotion, and even love of the system spring naturally from within. When you control not merely actions but the very desires, values, and emotional impulses that motivate those actions, you achieve a form of power that is practically inescapable because it is invisible even to those being controlled. The most perfect cage is one the prisoner has come to call home. The glass paperweight shatters at the moment of Winston's arrest, and with it fragments the illusion that there exists something in human experience that cannot be touched, altered, or reconstructed according to the will of those who possess the appropriate techniques of manipulation. Individual consciousness, which seems to us so solid and inviolable, reveals itself as surprisingly fragile when subjected to the right methods of psychological pressure applied in a systematic and scientific manner. The coral inside is just coral after all. As we conclude this account, we are left with questions that resist comfortable answers. If our identity, our deepest values, our very feelings can be systematically altered to the point where we experience the transformation as genuine and desirable, what are we really? Where does our essential humanity reside if it can be so completely rewritten? Are there aspects of human personality that are truly inviolable, or can everything be molded according to the will of those who possess the necessary knowledge and resources? These are not merely literary questions, they are urgent ones. 1984 offers us neither easy hope nor comforting solutions. It is an unrelenting mirror that reflects our fundamental vulnerability as conscious beings, a warning about the fragility of the psychological achievements we consider most precious: freedom of thought, personal integrity, the capacity to love and be loved authentically. These are not rights guaranteed by nature or by the unalterable structure of the human mind. They are delicate achievements that must be constantly defended against forces that seek to reshape them according to their own interests and needs for control. The price of consciousness is eternal vigilance,